Welcome to an Ascend demo. In this demo, we'll be walking through a hypothetical scenario in which our manager has asked us to drop into an unfamiliar project, update the pipeline to get new data, and then change the pipeline so that the downstream components actually use the new data within the pipeline. We'll go ahead and drop into that developers branch, demo Ayush. We see here that we're going to be working on the cab Snow pipeline, given that's the only one available. We'll drop straight into the building part of this. Right away, we know one thing for sure. The Snowflake icon here indicates that that's our data plane. So the Snowflake warehouse that's connected by this developer will be the warehouse that's being used for all the storage, running queries, etc. within their Snowflake warehouse. There's also a couple other pieces of information here. We know that they're connected to S3, they've got a custom Python reach, which probably is using an API endpoint, but it would take us a while to go through each one of these blocks and understand not only what's being ingested, but how exactly that data is being used. So instead, we're going to use our helpful AI assistant, Otto, to actually go through and give us a detailed summary of each component. Hey, Otto, can you give me a detailed summary of each component of this flow? A couple of things to note here after this prompt. One, we already have the context built in to this AI assistant. It'll just look at the flow that's open on our current window, and it'll know that that's the one we're referring to. A couple of other things here is it's working through each of the files here, where we not only have the flow definition, but we have each component's definition stored within its own file. So when you use version control, you'll notice that each of that code is stored there and can be referenced separately. But as you can see here, we have a general idea. This one's more code-based, where we can get an idea of what each of these is doing rather than having to comb through the code and get exactly that information. So if we go through each of these, we have a clear idea of what each of them are doing. And now that that's the case, let's see what connections are actually available to us. We know from our manager's introduction to the project that we are actually referencing some MySQL data, but we don't actually see that available here. So we want to make sure that there's a MySQL connection available. Hey, Otto, what connections are available to me in this flow? So we're going to see a couple of things here. First, we should see that there's an S3 connection available. We see that S3 is available. Yes, are there other connections available? Which we can see it completed successfully by showing us the S3 connection that's being used here. We do want to see if there's a MySQL connection available though. And another thing to note, as you might notice here as it's reading that file, is that we also have the Snowflake connection available to us because that's the one that's being used to store data, run the queries, etc. So correctly, it's showing us not only the S3 connection, but it's showing us the new MySQL and Snowflake connections as well. So now that we know that that's available, we'd actually just like it to ingest the data from Snowflake. We know that the table is called driver data, so let's just ask Otto to do that for us. Hey Otto, can you ingest the driver data table from the MySQL connection? So we've asked Otto now to get the data for us. And we're expecting Otto to write the code for us, and it should be fairly straightforward. If we compare it to what it might look like in S3, where we're comparing this component block, it should look somewhat similar to this. And we can see that's actually what it's done here. So it's given us the connection MySQL DB. That's correct. If we reference here, we can see that's called MySQL DB, and it's getting the driver data table. So let's go ahead and actually just save this because it's telling us that it can create this file for us. Yes, please save this. So Otto now will, in this file here, you can see that kind of popped up here, and it's going to pop up in the code editor as well. We're just going to go ahead and hit save because this looks good to us. And the other thing here now is we've got the new data, but the pipeline doesn't actually do anything with it, right? It's just an empty floating ingested block where it's just being stored in Snowflake. So instead, we're going to update this downstream component driver sentiment to actually include that now. And if we look at the code currently, it's only got this driver ID. But from the driver data table, we actually want to include the driver name column. So let's go ahead and do that. Yes. Can you include the driver name column in the driver sentiment component? So we've told Otto that we now want to include the driver name column. And so it's going to update the code. As we can see here, it's showing us the updated code, where in the second line in the select statement, it's showing us driver name. And we're going to kind of say, yes, please save, because it looks good to me, right? We have the driver name. We see this new group by statement being included here. So we've got everything we need. We're just going to go ahead and save it. So in a couple seconds here, we'll see that the code editor will actually have this changed in place. And we didn't have to do a single ounce of code writing to actually write code. So regardless of whether you're technical or not, it's pretty simple to write the code that you want through Otto. We look forward to you being able to use it.